We're all set.
All right. So this is the regular April meeting of the Union Township Planning Commission. So I'd like to welcome everybody. We'll start with our customary Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. Roll call, please.
Cody. Here, Union Township, Isabella County, Michigan.
Albrecht.
Here, Union Township, Isabella County, Mount Pleasant, Michigan.
Squattrito.
Here, and I am currently in the city of Mount Pleasant in Isabella County.
Shingles.
I'm not getting any sound.
Here currently in Mount Pleasant, Union Township, Isabella County.
Buckley.
Here, Union Township, Isabella County.
Darren.
Here, Union Township, Isabella County.
LaBelle.
Here, Union Township, Isabella County, Michigan.
Lapp.
Here, Union Township, Isabella County, Michigan.
And Fuller.
Present, Union Township, Isabella County.
All right, thank you. So I'm gathering that all of our commissioners can hear everything just fine right now. If there's any attendees who can't hear, probably the issue is maybe with your connection, you might need to refresh or exit and return, but we're going to proceed because I'm assuming that everyone is hearing okay, all the commissioners anyway. All right, so let's see. So we last met, we had a special meeting on March 30th. And so we have minutes from the March 30th meeting. So we'll move to consideration of those minutes. They're in your packet right after the agenda.
Motion to approve.
So there's a motion by Cody to approve the minutes as prepared. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Director of the Isabella County Emergency Management. If any point you need to replay this entire message, please call the number back on the caller ID.
I don't know exactly what that is.
I think that's the code red message that's going out about the vaccine clinic.
Well, why are we hearing it? The motion was by Cody to approve the March 30th minutes as prepared, and the second was by Lapp. Is there any discussion? Are there any corrections or any concerns about the March 30th minutes? Hearing none, I'll just ask for a voice and/or hand wave vote. All in favor of the motion to approve the minutes, please say aye and/or signal yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No, or signal no. Okay, so that motion carried, so our minutes are approved. So next item is correspondence, board reports, presentations. First one is updates from the Board of Trustees. Commissioner Cody.
At our last board meeting, we approved everything from the B7 to the I2 at the 2266 Northway Drive. That's it at our last meeting.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Commissioner Cody on Board of Trustees related issues? Seeing none, we'll move on. Next one is updates from Zoning Board of Appeals. Commissioner Buckley, anything to report?
Nothing to report at this time, no.
Okay. And then the last one is of the regular ones anyways, update from Sidewalks and Pathways Committee. That would be Commissioner Darren.
Yeah, we finally had our meeting and we were able to, even though we have a reduced membership, we did start reviewing the progress that was made and what was currently underway as far as sidewalks. Then we started discussing priorities for 2022 and beyond. So we are now trying to pull together that information to provide to Rodney for planning purposes. So.
All right. Any questions for sidewalks and pathways? I know they're on our agenda tonight, but any questions on their current activities or for Commissioner Darren on this? Okay, if not, then thank you. We'll move on. Any other reports and or presentations that anyone is aware of? Okay, sounds good. So next item is approval of the agenda. So you have the agenda in front of you. It's got a couple new business items and then some other business items which are continuing things that we've been dealing with. So are there any other items that anyone is aware of that need to come before us tonight? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as prepared.
I move to approve the agenda as prepared.
Motion by Lapp
Support.
to approve the agenda and
Support.
second was by Commissioner Cody. Further discussion? All right, again, I'll ask for a voice and or sign vote. So all in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye and or signal.
Aye.
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 Any opposed, no, or a thumbs down type signal? All right, so that motion carried. So we've approved our agenda. So now we've got, this is public comment. So again, relatively early in every meeting, we have a public comment. The purpose of this public comment is to give members of the public an opportunity to address the commission on items that are not on tonight's agenda. If anyone is attending who wishes to offer public comment, hit your raise hand button. We'll recognize you. We'll facilitate your ability to offer a public comment. We ask you to give us your name and address for the minutes and limit your comments to 3 minutes. There'll be an extended public comment later in the meeting. Public comment on items that are not on tonight's agenda is open at 7:10. I'm believing that everyone who's here is either a member of the commission, township staff, or here for other business. So not seeing any, we'll go ahead and close public comment also at 7:10. And we'll move on to our new business. So the first item of new business is the consideration of applications for appointment to the Sidewalks and Pathways Prioritization Committee. You have 3 applications in your packet. I'd like to ask, all right, so I'll recognize Commissioner Lapp.
I have a conflict of interest with this agenda item, so I asked to be removed from the board at this point. My
Okay.
spouse is one of the applicants.
Yes, and according to our, thank you, and according to our bylaws, that is a recognized conflict of interest, which does not need to be voted on by the commission. It's simply declared by the commissioner. So what are you going to do? Are you going to beam her to the other side or?
Yes, I will move her to attendee and then we'll bring her back at the end of the agenda item.
Okay, thank you. All right. So what I was going to do though was I was going to ask Rodney and or Peter to remind us of the number of positions we are needing to fill and any restrictions associated with those positions. In other words, which positions are they and what are the criteria?
Peter, do you want to go over that?
Yeah, so we have 2 positions on the Sidewalk and Pathways Committee. Those 2 positions are, I believe one is, okay, so we have a member at large vacant seat, and the other is a township resident. So for the one position, you do have to be a township resident. The member at large does not need to be a township resident. And so this is a committee that serves, is designated by the Planning Commission, makes recommendations on sidewalk and pathways plans for the township. It's probably much less complicated than being a member of our other boards such as the Planning Commission or EDA or ZBA or the other boards. So not as big of a commitment.
Okay, all right, thanks, I appreciate that. So, I mean, there's a variety of ways we could proceed, but since all 3 of the applicants are here, and I'm assuming all 3 of them can hear me at this point, I wonder if, and I'll ask the commissioners, obviously for your approval, but I was thinking of giving each of the applicants an opportunity to make a brief statement of interest and anything they'd like to tell us. I mean, they've submitted an application, but if there's anything they'd like to elaborate on, and then have them stand for questions, and then we would move to our deliberations, nominations, and so on. Any thoughts on that? Any objections to going that way? Okay, not seeing any. We can do that. So let's see. We've got, let's see, Hertzler, Dinsey, and it's the 3rd one, Seiler. So I'm going to go in alphabetical order. So I'm going to recognize John Dinsey first. So I think you're unmuted at this point. So if there's anything you'd like to, this is your opportunity, a minute or so, just to, you know, introduce yourself, give us your, whatever you'd like to say, and then we'll go to each person and then we'll have questions, if any.
Well, if I could just, my name's John Dinsey. I was a Union Township trustee from 2008 to 2012. And during that time, I helped develop a sidewalk ordinance. I represented the township on the with the Tiger Grant group that developed a plan for pathways, and I see that's still on your website, the cultural loop and so on. I'm currently representing the township on the dog park advisory board. When I was on the township board, I got involved with Pam Swindock in developing the dog park at Mission Creek, and, you know, the township, the city, and our Friends of the Dog Park group all worked together to get that. So, you know, I could go on. I really do think this is a vital issue. When I was a township trustee, there were people in wheelchairs on Bluegrass Road. There were women pushing baby buggies on Bluegrass Road. There were a couple of goat paths on each side. And I'm happy to see that there are some sidewalks now and pretty, you know, 100% improved to what it was. And I'm just vitally interested. I'm also a bicyclist, so I like the pathways idea. And I just couldn't be more interested in serving on this committee. I'll leave it at that.
All right, thank you very much, John. And so next is Phil Hertzler.
Hi, I'm a professor at Central Michigan University since 1998. I've been a township resident since about 2003, I think, or so. And I served along with John Dins on the original sidewalks pathways committee when we put together the guidelines, and enjoyed my time doing that at the time. I'm a runner on the local roads and a bicyclist as well on local roads. So I'm very interested in doing what I can to make the roads and paths more friendly to outdoor recreation and for people getting to places they need to go. One thing that really still sticks in my mind is about 15 years ago when the Lincoln Road and Pickard intersection was redone and was closed. People just came out of the woodworks and were walking around that intersection from all the neighboring subdivisions. And it would be wonderful if people felt comfortable to do that again in that area. So I'm very interested in finishing off some of our sidewalks that are not complete and trying to connect them to destinations that people would want to walk to.
Okay, thank you. And so last is, but not least, is Jeff Seiler, and I apologize in advance if I did not pronounce that correctly, but and if
No,
I
you did good. You did good. That's a good job.
Okay.
Yeah, again, Jeff Seiler, Union Township. I just moved in, new to the area. So I was born and raised in the Merrill area, but I'm just moving back. I went to Central years ago. Looking to get involved into the community. And this would be a good step that I would like to get involved into, trying to help out in regards to the site outs, because I think it's very vital in regards to give those people an opportunity to get out and about, instead of there's that's a challenge of walking on the streets or the side of the roads that people just are afraid of, and we got to protect them. So, but thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. So those are the three applicants, and so I'd like to ask commissioners, do any of you have any questions that you'd like to ask any of the applicants while they're right here in our midst? Okay, I don't see any. Are you ready to just proceed to discussion and deliberation and selection? Y'all are a quiet bunch tonight. Oh, I see a hand. There's a hand. Ryan Buckley. I'll recognize Ryan.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and ask a question. I'd just like to hear briefly from each of the candidates what they think is either a challenge or an opportunity that they'd like to try to accomplish should they be appointed to the committee. I think it would only be reasonable to try to get a sense of what each of the candidates thinks is might be a priority or might be an opportunity in serving on the committee.
Okay. Good question. So I think we'll go in the same order. So we'll go to John Dinsey first, and then Phil, and then Jeff.
Well, I think a particular challenge is, Isabella Road, particularly with the need for sidewalks. I also would like to see Isabella Road put on a road diet and have it a 3-lane road, so you could have more room for bike lanes. I'm interested in some of the problems with right-of-way, and if there have been, has the township been stymied at various points with right-of-way issues, and to look deeply into ways around those obstacles. Maybe even think about a special tax assessment district, for raising funds for sidewalks. I'm not sure about, if there are problems with the county government and the county road commission. I'm not really up to date on that, but so I would like to emphasize sidewalk issues on Isabella Road and resolving right-of-way problems.
Okay, Phil?
Well, there's two places within half a mile of the Township Hall in McDonald Park that I'm very interested in. One would be completing the sidewalk that ends just past the new Mercantile Bank facility along the farmer's field there to connect it to the intersection there at Pickard and Lincoln, so that people could walk coming out of all those neighborhoods all the way to McDonald Park as a destination. And then going south along Lincoln, continuing a sidewalk from those areas near the Commission on Aging and those other facilities to extend that sidewalk to the park as well. So those are both in my neighborhood, and I've been hoping for completion of those for years now, and I'd like to do what I can to see those completed.
Okay, thank you. And Jeff?
Mine's kind of right along the same way as Phil. I mean, being new to the area, I'm not completely filled with all the different areas, but I do see a lot of areas where it's not completed sidewalks. That would be one of the big things, is just to complete the high traffic areas for sidewalks. That's where I really think would be the number one task.
Okay. Thanks very much. Other questions from commissioners? Going once. Twice. Okay. So do we want to exile them back to the attendee side, or how do you want to do that?
I can do that. Give me just a moment. We'll
Okay.
move
Well,
them.
thanks. We really appreciate that you're all here and that you're able to address us. I think it's definitely better when we can have a situation like that. So thanks for making the time and for giving us your views.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So we've got 3 applicants for 2 positions. And so obviously we can only select 2. So I'm opening it for discussion. Anyone is free at any time to nominate anyone, but whether you want to try to have some discussion first is an open question as well. And I believe, am I correct that all 3 of them are in fact township residents?
That is correct.
Okay, so there's no restriction in terms of who goes into which slot.
That is correct.
All right. Commissioner Darren.
Yeah, I guess I've worked with a couple of these gentlemen in the past, and I don't have a problem with them on the team. The things that, and I thought Commissioner Buckley's question was very good because it helped me with who I want to work with on the sidewalks and pathways. And I liked what I heard from Phil Hartzler, and it sounds like he is on the same page with the rest of the Pathways and Sidewalks Committee. We've got to start finishing up what we've already started. So having a priority with that in mind is great. He also talked about focus, he didn't come right out and say his focus for what would be next, but at least he's got experience in the area, and I thought that was good. On the opposite hand, I like that Jeff Seiler is new to the area and doesn't have any preconceived priorities. We heard from both Dinsey and Hertzler preconceived priorities on what they want to accomplish, which it's good. They're paying attention to the area. We do need that. But it's also nice to have somebody that, in my opinion, that's open-minded and fresh eyes. That's not specifically focused on a certain priority. Just my opinion.
Okay, and we've got Commissioner LaBelle.
Yeah, I appreciate the applicants coming on to, kind of fill us in and introduce themselves. To me, I felt like all three are very qualified, and any one of them would be deserving of one of these spots. I feel as, looking at the applications, two of them are representatives of CMU. One is a business owner. I mean, I would like a little bit of diversity, maybe, one of the CMU folks and one of the, business owners. Just again, I would second Commissioner Darren's, just a fresh eyes is okay. Also experience is great as well. But maybe just a little more diversity in the backgrounds would be beneficial. I don't know any of the three applicants, but they all appear to have good qualities and would be very deserving of any one of the spots.
Okay, thank you. Other comments from commissioners? I agree. I think they're all qualified. Some have prior experience in this area, but as was pointed out, we're also interested in having fresh blood and new people coming in and participating in the governance and helping to shape the future of the township. So you've got three good folks to pick from. Any other comments that people want to make? I think we would probably do individual nominations and consider them, fill each position. So one can also make a nomination at any time. Commissioner Cody.
I'd like to nominate Jeff Seiler for one of the positions. Do I have to name which one?
Well, we'll have to figure out which one. Do you have a preference?
Doesn't matter. No, township president position.
Okay, so there's been a nomination by Commissioner Cody of Jeff Seiler for the township resident position. Is there a second? Second by Darren. Okay. So I think we'll just do these as votes one at a time. So any further discussion on the nomination? All right. So the vote is whether or not to elect Jeff Seiler to a position on the Sidewalks and Pathways Prioritization Committee. We'll ask for a voice roll call, please.
Cody,
Yes.
Shingles,
Yes.
Squatrito,
Yes.
Albrecht,
Yes.
Darren,
Yes.
LaBelle,
Yes.
Fuller,
Yes.
and Buckley.
Yes.
That motion carries 8-0 with Jeff Seiler as a township resident with the term expiring 8/15/2021.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So that one expires relatively soon, so we'll be coming
They
back and
both-
doing
both
that
do.
one later in the summer. All right. So we have then the member at large position as well. So are there any nominations for that position? Commissioner Buckley.
Yes, I'd like to nominate Phil Hertzler, and I'll echo the sentiments of the other commissioners too. I very much appreciate that, particularly given that we have times in the past when it's difficult to get interest in a committee. I very much appreciate the interest from all three applicants that are interested in that committee. I do think, just from seeing their applications and from hearing them speak, I think that any one of them would be qualified. And I'll be honest, and maybe it's not fair, but I appreciate that John is a member of the Isabella County Parks and Recreation Commission, and appreciate his service there. And so my thinking was that we might give Phil an opportunity to get involved on a community board as well.
Okay, so the nomination by Commissioner Buckley is for Phil Hertzler to the member at large position on the committee. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Fuller. Further discussion? Okay, so the motion is to elect Phil Hertzler to the other open seat on the Sidewalks and Pathways Prioritization Committee. And I fully echo the comments that were made by Commissioner Buckley in his nomination. Any further discussion? All right, again, I'll ask for a roll call voice vote, please.
Squattrito,
Yes?
Darren,
Yes.
LaBelle,
Yes.
Buckley,
Yes.
Cody,
Yes.
Fuller,
Yes.
Shingles,
Yes.
and Albrecht.
Yes.
That motion also carries 8-0. Phil Hertzler nominated as member of large, expiring 8/15/2021.
Oh, so they both expire this summer. Okay. All right. Well, excellent. Very good. So the committee is back to full strength. Congratulations to those folks. You are appointed. I guess you're effective immediately. So, Mike will be in touch with your marching orders, or however that committee works. Thank you again to everyone who applied and everybody for their service. All right. So we're ready to move on, and welcome back to Commissioner Lapp. So the next item is zoning ordinance amendments. So we don't have any site plans. We don't have any, individual property related items this month. And so we have a few other things. And so our staff has been combing the zoning ordinance with a fine tooth comb, and they've come up with some things that they'd like to suggest in terms of potential tweaks. And so I'll turn it over to our staff to introduce this topic and guide us through what they'd like to get from us tonight.
Thank you very much. Peter and I were both very surprised to be in the position of not having anything for you, because we are hearing from the development community of a number of projects floating around, but none of them have yet formally come in for review. So all we can say is stay tuned. I expect we're going to still see a bunch, but it happened we had a lull. This particular project, as we talked about when we adopted the new ordinance, that we would likely be coming to you with kind of a punch list of items at some point. We talked about, I think, a year of working with the ordinance. So this is a little early, but it felt like a good opportunity to do this. So we kind of pushed it ahead a little bit and put this memo together. The list that you have before you reflects basically our experience as staff working with this ordinance over the last number of months. I think 7 or 8 months now. Peter has kept a punch list. I've kept a punch list, and so what you see is a combination of those elements. In addition to some, I guess, what you might call punch list items, there are a few bigger items that are in here as well that I would like to focus on. But before I do, hopefully everybody had a chance to read our April 12th memo. I think I'd like to start with any questions or comments you may have, anything you saw that either you liked or didn't like in this list.
Okay, it's open for response to that question from commissioners. If anybody has anything they want to bring up.
So are we just gonna go through this list of what we had questions on, or are we accepting this list, or are we gonna go by item by item?
Well, thank you. So my thought is to start with, if there's a particular item in this list that you had a question about, I'd rather start with those questions. In doing that, you'll probably hit the key items that I'd like to talk about. But if not, there'll be a few items, I think about a half dozen, that I'd like to highlight. Many of these are typos or technical changes where we noted conflicts or minor issues. So a lot of those items are like that. For example, the first item that talks about automotive service station, we have a problem in the ordinance that we use a couple of different terms in the document, and so we just wanted to standardize the term, make sure we don't have two different terms in use for the same land use. So you see a lot of that in this list, but then there are some that are broader issues or broader categories to consider. So my thought is, like I said, start with things you're concerned about. We can go through those, and then if you don't hit an item that I've highlighted, I'll certainly add that in at the end and bring that to your attention.
Okay, so again, if there's are there any items that anyone is particularly concerned about at the outset, or just wants to respond to or comment on? Alex?
Yeah, on page 2, section 3.4, nursery plant material. Is this referring to a landscaper's yard or a nursery growing trees?
Peter, do you want to address that question?
You said nursery, what page are you on, Alex?
Page 2 of your memo, section 3.4, 3.7.
Okay.
Is this a landscaper's yard where you have nursery plants for sale, or is this a nursery where somebody's growing Christmas trees, or?
So while Peter's looking at that, I can tell you that this came up. It was identified to us that we had a missing reference. It's actually a plant material nursery is allowable use in the R1 district, subject to special use approval. We have in our new ordinance, we have a land use table where all the land uses and all the zoning districts are in that one big multi-page table. And then after that, we have each zoning district listed separately with allowable uses in each one. And there's simply a discrepancy between the two.
Okay.
The plant material nursery is in the table, big table, but it's not in the separate R1 zoning district listing.
So we're not necessarily adding this to the R1 residential district as a special use.
Right, it's already allowed there. It was allowed in the previous ordinance, and so it was essentially a typo that it was missed on the list for the R1 district.
Maybe while he's looking at that, the one, just the two above that on the same page, or three above that, agricultural processing and packaging.
Mhm.
You say sections 3.4, 3.6, 3.17, and 3.18. In my copy of the zoning ordinance, the industrial districts are 316 and 317, and office service is 318.
You are absolutely correct. Thank you. I will make that.
All right.
And we may see that in one other spot, I think.
Okay. I mean, we could, we could have a meat packing plant in the office service district, but my guess is probably not.
Right. No, that was intended to be 316 and 317.
So the ordinance defines nursery plant material as a space, building, and or structure or combination thereof where live trees, shrubs, and other plants used for gardening and landscaping are propagated, stored, and or offered for sale on the premises, but not including any space, building, or structure used principally for the sale of fruits, vegetables, or Christmas trees.
Sounds like it was just a typo and needs to be clarified in the tables, actually.
That's correct.
All right. Other particular questions from folks?
I had another question in page 3, 6.18. I noted, I should have had it opened. Wouldn't this sentence here, he says revise subsection 18 or 618C, but wouldn't that also replace the subsection E in that same section?
Right. And if you look at that number 1 there, the end of it says and delete subsection E.
Oh, okay, yeah, all right. I missed that part.
Yep.
That's interesting. There was no D.
Right.
It just wasn't there. All right. So your proposal is that the only filling stations in an agricultural district would be ones that are specifically there to service the farm equipment?
That's correct. We currently allow these filling stations in the ag district and as a special use, and we don't have any clarification to it. So we could see a filling station full scale operation appear in our farming areas. They would have to get special use approval, so we have that obstacle. But I'd really rather simply set it up that if we're going to have them there, that they be set up for farm equipment only. Because there's really no other reason to have a filling station out in the middle of nowhere. Essentially, that's creating a spot zoning circumstance, effectively a spot use anyway.
Do we have any land that is zoned agricultural where there's a relatively major road going through, like 20 or any other mission or something that's at the far reaches of the township where someone might decide, well, gee, it might be a good idea to actually have a gas station out here?
I think 20 is probably the most likely scenario. Pickard could be another one, going out Pickard, but going out 20 west of town certainly would be a very likely area where something like that might occur.
Okay. But if this goes in, they just couldn't do that. It wouldn't even be a regular, a standard filling station open to the general public would just not be an option on agriculturally zoned property.
That's correct.
All right.
And this is, to some extent, this is in keeping with truly making the agricultural area an agricultural preservation zone. You know, that we're trying to preserve the farming community and preserve the rural character of those areas that are intended to be that in our master plan. So eliminating land uses that are inconsistent with that policy of agricultural preservation is really what this is about. You know, certainly it is important to support our farming community. And so, you know, as you note, may have noted in here, there's a number of agricultural support type businesses that we're proposing to add into the agricultural district. But this would really be another one, an agricultural support business. You know, I don't think it's really probably pretty small number of users, so I'm not sure it's a likely scenario, but certainly if there's a need, this would allow them to provide that for that need, because we do need to support the community if we're going to keep it.
Okay. Other comments or questions from folks? Alex?
Yeah, I see in section 7, you're proposing that if somebody wants to add a detached accessory structure, that they have to go through the site plan process.
Which page or section again?
Well, I was reading in page 4, an accessory building location for any principal use subject to site plan approval for 14.2. So are they gonna have to bring a site plan so that we can see there's no conflicts with parking and loading? Or is that something that's submitted with a building application, permit application?
So this is, there are certain accessory buildings that are subject to site plan approval in that section 14.2. The reason for this language is really just simply to ensure that if something's coming in, that they're not blocking required parking. I think the actual site plan process if it was only an accessory structure, as long as it's of a certain size, it's administrative site plan review. It would not actually come to the plan commission, but would be reviewed by the zoning administrator. If it's part of a larger project, then it would come to you and they would need to show that structure on there. But the key to this section is really to focus on ensuring that they're not creating a conflict with other requirements of the ordinance.
So it's an administrative review.
Right. Predominantly, if it's just a structure coming in, it'd be an administrative review.
Commissioner Cody.
I just noticed that we skipped A and other business, so we'll have to go back there.
Maybe. Did I make a mistake?
No.
We're still under, I think we're still under new business.
Oh, okay, never mind. Sorry.
Okay. All right. So other questions, we're still in questions and comments before we go back to Rodney for his list of biggies.
That's all I had.
Okay. Well, I'm not seeing any right now. Of course, it's an open thing. So as people think of things, they can bring them up, but I'll go back to Rodney if there's the ones that you want to highlight.
All right. If we could go back to the first page, right at the bottom, it says section 3, titled Special Use Permits Requirements. This is kind of just a general comment. We'd like to go through that table of all the special uses, and I would think there are still some special uses we could actually remove from the list of special uses, move them to a principal permitted use by right. We've noted some there, such as multiple family dwellings, 5 units or more, cemetery, conservation area, gunsmith, gun and archery ranges, and contractor yards, warehousing and general manufacturing in those certain districts where they're listed as special use. These are activities that really probably should be a principal permitted use. We ran into it with Mr. Malley's contractor yard, where he had to get a special use permit to expand his contractor yard to the east side of Packard Road. And he went through that process late last year. In the industrial district, a contractor yard really ought to be a principal use by right. It really does not need to be a special use. And so we'd like to go through that list. And these certainly are ones that I saw as things that we don't really need a special use permit for in the districts where that's required right now. And just basically bring back to you our set of recommendations for changes there. Any of these activities would still require site plan approval. They would just no longer need the public hearing process and Board of Trustees approval through the special use. So that's the first item. And as I said, what you see here in this list is what in our initial walkthrough, what we saw. There may be one or two more, but I expect that this is probably the bulk of the list of changes we would recommend.
Okay. Yeah, John, again, raise your hand or alert me if you want to comment on any of these, but I think that one was pretty straightforward. So go ahead.
The bottom of page 2, the last two items there, both labeled section 4.2. This is about minimum required front yard setbacks. We require various setbacks from the front yard in the 3 business districts and the 2 industrial districts. They're not consistent. For example, our B7 district only requires a 15-foot setback, but our other business districts require substantially larger setbacks. Even though we have this zoning is on the same road, we have B7 and B5 and B4, all in some cases all in the same road corridor. So with the interest of both making efficient use of the land that available, but also allowing these buildings in the business districts to become more prominent on the road frontage, we'd like to propose to reduce that front yard setback and for example, create a standard setback in the business district. I suggested perhaps 20 foot, it could be 15, but to set essentially one standard that would apply to the business districts that would allow those buildings to come forward on the lot and as I said, be more prominent for those users. And similarly with industrial, for the same reason, we have limited industrial land, and we really don't need the large setback that we have in the ordinance in either of the industrial districts. We can address issues with buffering or screening with the landscaping requirements we have, with if we need to with the berm, and quite frankly other things like lighting we've addressed, so that we won't have the types of impacts from industrial that we've seen elsewhere. More importantly, with anything that is let's call it a more intensive industrial use, something that might have noise or other impacts, we have those are special uses in the district, and we have the ability to address those on a case-by-case basis, ensure that those impacts are handled. So just like to look at reducing and standardizing those front yard setback requirements.
And I am good with the standardizing the 15-foot setback for the B zones. I mean, I agree with what you're saying here.
Thank you. The next item is on page 3, down towards the bottom. Home occupations in home-based businesses. This one would directly affect you. We have a couple of typos there, but or one typo, number 1 there, but number 2 in particular, I'd like to suggest the idea of eliminating the Plan Commission approval requirement for a home occupation. We have 2 categories essentially that are both home-based businesses. Now, in our new ordinance, we have home occupation, which is less intensive, no outside employees. Excuse me. I've apparently been on Zoom meetings too much today. I'm actually starting losing my voice. The home occupation is kind of less intensive activity. And then this home-based limited business category is intended to be the more intensive activity. It allows more use of more space in the lot, and also does allow for some outside employees. And so this recommendation would be to make home occupation an administrative approval, while keeping the home-based limited business as an approval that requires your action in a public hearing. And then the last item in that list would be to eliminate the annual renewal for a home occupation permit. It's not really necessary. It's a administrative challenge that we don't need to look at every home occupation on an annual basis, or we can simply through the ordinance enforcement process, we can address any concerns that may come up with a particular operation. So it would be a big change for you. You would see fewer of applications essentially in that category.
Is this more in keeping with do more municipalities do it this way than what we're doing?
In my experience, yes, and it is also something. I'm putting on my economic development hat for a moment. I'm a big fan of home occupations because they're a wonderful way to start a business. It's low cost, low startup cost, and so for those that can fit within our requirements, being able to start up a business and operate that early year or years in a low cost environment can help them be successful. So, in my mind, this is part of making that as easy as possible to do, while still having reasonable oversight to make sure that they're doing it in a way that does not affect their neighbors. And that's something that on the home occupation side as an administrative approval, we can still do, while then taking that more intensive activity to you as a planning commission.
Mm-hmm. Is whether there are more other outside employees or not the key distinction between the two?
That is one key. The other one is that the home-based limited business does allow a little bit more floor space, essentially, a little bit larger area that they can operate in.
Okay, so if this were to be if this were to go into effect, essentially, the person would file an application or contact you all, and you would look at what they're proposing to do and then determine whether it comes to us or whether you handle it administratively under the home occupation.
That is correct.
All right. Okay, looks like we're ready to move on.
Next one is on page 5 of our memo. This is another significant one. This is one that will affect the township board, actually. I have not yet discussed it with the Board of Trustees. So Lisa, this is your first introduction to it, but it will be coming up if there's interest in it. And that is the authority to grant special use permits down towards the bottom, section 14.3B. Right now, a special use approval, of course, goes, you make a recommendation, it goes to the Board of Trustees and they have final approval. That has been a common action in the past in townships. It is far less common today. It is far more common to see a planning commission having the final authority over a special use permit. And so to my mind, this is really about streamlining the process. As we looking at Mr. Malley's case, Mr. Malley had really probably added about 2 months to his project in terms of the approval process because of that, the requirements both for the public hearing, but more as importantly for ultimately for the Board of Trustees action on it. And so if the special use permit was kept at the Planning Commission level, it would be more integrated into our development review process, and would save a little time, while still obviously you would still have the same standards would apply. You would still have the same review process. Your action would just move from a recommendation to final action. So as I said, this is something that if you're interested in this change, then we would take it to the Board of Trustees and have the conversation with them about it and see if that's something that they're comfortable with before we would proceed with anything in terms of a change. but I want to just bring it to your attention and see if this is something that you'd be comfortable with.
Any initial reactions? Commissioner Cody?
I think it's a good idea because the planning commission has done a lot more research on it. The board of trustees, they don't do as much land, things like that. They didn't take the class, know as much as the planning commission. So honestly, I think it's a great idea. But that's me personally.
Commissioner LaBelle?
Yeah, I would second Commissioner Cody's comments and sentiments toward that as a a developer, as a dealing with commercial tenants, with residential, commercial, whatever that may be. I think this is anything we can do to cut down on the time that these folks want to get started. That's advantageous. So this would be a wonderful change, I think, to our current ordinance.
Any other comments? Okay. So.
Right, thank you. The last page, page 6, has a few items on it. The first item there is food trucks. We've had food trucks come up occasionally. We treat them right now as a temporary use. So if somebody wanted to operate in a parking lot, Walmart or something for a day, we can deal with that through a temporary use permit. But they're not specifically listed in our ordinance, and they are a growing activity. We're seeing them both as sort of, again, a startup restaurant type food facility where somebody went to start a food service business, starts with a food truck because it's less expensive, because they're not tied down to a bricks and mortar location, and they can experiment. So it's a very nice way to start up a food service business. But it's also a way that restaurants are spreading their reach. We've seen in some cases in other communities where even higher end restaurants have established a food truck that they can take to the farmer's market, or they can have at a special event, just to extend their influence and extend their brand. In addition to that, we have seen interest locally, and I've certainly seen it elsewhere, for a more permanent installation. For example, if you have a farmer's market, you have a permanent farmer's market. You have stalls. You may even have a roofed enclosure where the farmers can set up, and there's even power there, and all the facilities, bathrooms, and other things. We're getting interest in the idea of creating a permanent location where food trucks could congregate, where people could come and try out different food items at one location, where there would be permanent outdoor seating, bathrooms, and parking facilities, all that sort of thing. So this is a kind of a growing niche, and it's something that we probably should address in our zoning ordinance in some fashion. Mr. Buckley has his hand raised.
Brian?
Yeah, I would just like to express my support. Rodney has not pointed to anything that I disagree with yet, but the food trucks in particular is, I think, a particularly good opportunity for Union Township to, potentially capitalize on some economic development that is kind of flexible and diversifies some of the options that we might have here in the community. I don't know if many of you spend much time up in Traverse City, but if you have, you've probably been to Little Fleet, which is exactly what Rodney's talking about, and that gets use. You can walk in there in the winter, and that's still getting use, albeit less use than the summertime. But those are fantastic opportunities, I think, to bring a little bit of diversity of cuisine, and also have an opportunity to to allow community members to kind of come together in an outdoor format like that. So I'm very much in support of that. Some language in our ordinance that addresses that sort of opportunity.
Okay, very good. Other comments? Okay. Any others that you want to highlight?
I have a couple more here. The next one on the list, medical marijuana caregivers. Until very recently, about the time we actually adopted our ordinance, actually, the Michigan Supreme Court had directed in their decisions that medical marijuana caregivers were not subject to local zoning. A previous case, they had found that the 2008 voter-approved law did not give any room for local government to regulate caregivers in any way. If you recall, medical under that 2008 law, this is the original law that brought medical marijuana to Michigan. There were patients and caregivers, and patients obviously you have a license to grow marijuana for yourself. You could grow up to 12 plants in your own locked space, and could only use them for yourself. A caregiver was somebody who grew marijuana for a group of up to 5 patients. So they could grow 12 plants for each patient, 60 plants total. They could also be a patient and grow 12 for themselves. So it was really up to 72 plants total in their own locked space. As I said, that was until late last year, it was something that we could not zone. But the Michigan Supreme Court actually essentially reversed itself. What they said was, in a case in another community, for another community, they essentially said, well, we didn't exactly mean we didn't intend to entirely prevent local zoning from being involved. What in the case that was involved there, actually, that community allowed caregivers as essentially a home occupation. I guess what we would call our home-based limited business, more intensive activity. It required an approval process, but it was allowed in the agricultural residential areas as more or less this home occupation. They upheld that ordinance. It was interesting because they struck down a very similar ordinance in a community that I used to work for a number of years earlier. So they truly completely reversed themselves on the issue. So what that means for us is we now need to regulate, or at least address caregivers in our ordinance in some way, so that they are a lawful land use. And so what we've noted here are 2 ways that we can do that. And one is to allow them essentially as a home occupation type format in 1 or more zoning districts. Certainly the agricultural district might be a reasonable place for that. And the other one would be to allow them in commercial districts, subject to site plan approval. And so I just wanted to get your thoughts on this. This would not, by the way, be bringing in anything that's allowed under the more recent state laws, the larger commercial facilities. That would not be part of our discussion. It would only be these caregivers at this point. I think Doug had his hand up, and then Mr. Buckley had his hand up.
Okay. Hey, Rodney, just a quick question. So if we were to go with option 1, where it's allowing in the ag, subject to home occupation permit, if we go back to kind of what was suggested earlier, that it would remove the requirement for a public hearing and planning commission approval of a home occupation replaced with administrative zoning permit. Is that kind of what that process would be like now for this specific instance?
Well, but what we would do, frankly, is take the page out of that community's ordinance that was accepted by the Supreme Court. I recall, I'll have to go back and look at the details. It's been a little while since I've looked at this issue, but as I recall, that one did have a public process, a planning commission approval. But I'll double check that. I'll certainly make aware of that. I will say this: the 2008 Act had very specific privacy requirements. And it made it very difficult, I think almost impossible, to hold a public hearing, for example, because that would require providing notice that was not consistent with the 2008 law's privacy requirements. So we might be able to do kind of a site plan kind of format, but I don't believe we could actually have a public hearing or a special use permit or something like that for these activities. So we might, although I noted home occupation permit, we might be doing something separate, that sort of follows, like the intent would be to follow the process that the Supreme Court approved. But as I said, it's unlikely to have a public hearing component to it.
Okay, thank you.
And then Ryan.
Rodney, you mentioned with the medical marijuana caregivers that we're specifically focusing the conversation to this use at hand. And you pointed out that it would not be for the larger industrial or even recreational use. Is there a reason why Union Township is not having that conversation just from the economic development perspective alone?
Well, that's a good question. Right now, the policy of the township is that the medical marijuana facilities that were allowed under the 2016 laws are not allowed in the township. That's a Board of Trustees policy, and it's also a Board of Trustees policy to not allow the recreational marijuana facilities, what they're now called adult use marijuana facilities or establishments, actually. Under the more recent 2018 voter approved laws. That is a Board of Trustee policy, and any change to that policy would need to start with the Board of Trustees. The reason why this is coming up without that is because we really do have to act here. With the Supreme Court's decision, medical marijuana caregivers under the old 2008 law are now a lawful land use, and we are under an obligation to address that in our ordinance in some fashion. Otherwise, we're essentially excluding a lawful land use. So that, like I said, this is not bringing up the larger picture of these bigger commercial marijuana facilities. So that, number one, that Board of Trustees policy is there, and any decision would start with them. I will say this, I'm in regular communication with Jacob Kane, the city planner for Mount Pleasant. We meet about once a month. Peter and I and Jacob have met regularly with him, and he has been wrestling with their marijuana facility laws, which have led to litigation already. I am very happy to not be in the middle of that. There certainly is some economic benefit. There are also some pretty big challenges. Bay City, Bangor Township, and Bay County both went all in on the medical and the recreational marijuana. They allowed multiple licenses, almost unlimited. And what happened was a lot of existing businesses suddenly found themselves priced out of the market. You had long time businesses that had at leased their facility for many, many years, or even owned it in some cases, and simply got offers they couldn't refuse, or the owner got offers they couldn't refuse, and ended their lease. It's a significant issue that the marijuana facilities can outbid anybody for anything, and it does create an imbalance in the marketplace in that circumstance. Mount Pleasant tried to address that by having a very limited number of licenses, which is the genesis of the litigation that's currently going on. So it's not, you really can't entirely solve the problem that way either. This is a business, an industry that is rapidly shaking out. I think in some ways, everybody thought it was, it's sort of like the casinos in Detroit, where it would be unlimited money and no trouble. And they're finding differently. So I suspect that we're going to see a lot of adjustments and such in that industry in the next few years as players come and go, and ultimately the ones that are successful, come down to a few, just like any other new operation. So I don't mind at all that we're not in the midst of that, even if we might be missing out on a few economic development opportunities.
Thanks for that clarification.
Okay, other comments on this topic? All right, I think you said maybe there was one more.
Well, there's one more, and then there's one that's actually not on the list. The one that's one more is ponds there at the bottom. This is simply something that we currently require a grading permit to create a non-agricultural pond. In fact, we require a grading permit. We just did a grading permit for an agricultural pond. It's worth considering putting something in the zoning ordinance that addresses the kind of residential ponds or things. We're not talking about stormwater management facilities. This was where somebody wants to simply dig a pond either for swimming or for decoration or such. It's not that these are a bad thing, but they can create trouble for neighbors in some cases. They can also create safety issues. And so having some very basic standards in our zoning ordinance to address those things, I think has some value to consider. So we'd like to bring something to you in that area. It would still be something to be an administrative approval, probably following that grading permit format, but just to have some basic safety standards. The other item, the one item is not on the list, and it should have been, is outdoor seating. And of course, with COVID, we did provide essentially an administrative process to allow for temporary outdoor seating. Hunter's Ale House took advantage of it. Certainly a number of places in the city did, but it's not really in our ordinance in that format. And so we'd like to just kind of codify it into our ordinance that outdoor seating areas are allowed as accessory to a restaurant and set it up for a minor site plan approval process. So it's essentially an administrative review if an existing restaurant wants to add outdoor seating, and they can do it on their property without impacting required parking or other facilities. And so just that one I'd like to run by you as an additional item on the list.
So that would be if they can do it on their property. If they're doing what like in downtown Mount Pleasant, if they're putting stuff in the street, that's a governance issue. Is that right?
That's correct. Here for the township, we don't have any real option for that because we don't control the road right of way. And really our roads are not, we can't close the roads that our commercial businesses are on. Even Encore Boulevard, which would be considered a local street, is not something we could close to allow for that. So yes, this would all be on their property. And we would have, as I said, a limitation that it could not, eliminate required parking. Basically, if they wanted to do something that did, for example, it altered a site in a way that would affect the ordinance requirements, we would have that coming to you as a site plan review.
Okay. Commissioner Buckley?
Just a clarification, is that, does some language regarding outdoor seating for restaurants, does that include alcohol sales, or is that just strictly, are those two separate issues?
Well, in the past, we wouldn't have had to really worry about it, but the state has also altered their standards for outdoor alcohol consumption. And so, yes, we would allow whatever the restaurant is allowed to do inside, as long as they can do it lawfully outside in the outdoor seating, they could continue to do that. I don't think we would differentiate there.
Good. It seemed to make sense that if a restaurant has a license to sell alcohol, that they could sell indoors or outdoors too. So that would be good to see.
Yep.
Other comments on any of those topics? So to recap in terms of anything else you would like from us on this tonight?
That's all I needed from you. I think based on the comments and based on the lack of concerns about items we've noted here in terms of anything you don't want to see, what we would do from here, two things. We would take that special use item to the Board of Trustees, just to get their blessing on it from a policy direction. And then we'd be coming back to you at a future meeting with a proposed ordinance amendment for your review. And once you're happy with it, then we take it through the public hearing process.
Okay. Any final comments then from folks? All right. Thank you very much. So thanks for that. Good discussion. So those were our two new business items. So then we'll move on to other business. If you remember, when we met for our regular meeting in March, there was a little glitch with when we were electing officers because the vice secretary was not included in the agenda. We approved the agenda, but then we got to the elections and we decided not to do it. And then because we only had 5 out of, I think it was 5 members at the special meeting, 5 or 6, I thought it was best to wait and do this when everyone was here. So we still need to elect a vice secretary. So this would be for a 1-year term running through next March, or I guess through next February's meeting. So are there any, and so again, the vice secretary would be the secretary, the elected secretary is Doug LaBelle. And so the vice secretary would operate in the absence of the secretary if that occurs at a meeting. And right now, we're not actually physically signing the site plans, but keeping track of the changes and conditions and being another pair of eyes for the minutes. And you are listed signing the minutes of if you're the acting secretary and so on for that meeting. So are there any nominations for vice secretary? Self or otherwise?
Nobody wants to do it, I'll do it.
I'll nominate Stan Shingles.
Support.
So Stan Shingles has been nominated to the position of vice secretary by Fuller with a second by Buckley, I believe. Is that right? Was that Ryan or was that Doug?
That was Alex.
No, Alex was nominated.
Oh, I was nominated.
Who was the second?
I believe it was Doug that seconded.
I'm sorry?
I believe it was Doug that seconded.
Was it Doug?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So second by LaBelle. Any other nominations? Any other nominations? Any other nominations? All right, hearing none, it is an officer, so I'll ask for a voice roll call.
Albrecht,
Yes.
Shingles,
Recuse.
Darren,
Yes.
Lapp,
Yes.
Fuller,
Yes.
LaBelle,
Yes.
Buckley,
Yes.
Squattrito,
Yes.
and Cody.
Yes.
Okay, congratulations. So we have a full slate of officers going forward. And so then another thing we did at that March meeting, at that special meeting, was we conducted the annual review of the bylaws. And so we looked at the existing bylaws, had a discussion, made one specific change, which was to rearrange the agenda to eliminate the issue that we just talked about, or that affected the action that we just took. And then also made some suggestions. And so what you have in your packet there is the edited version, which shows the proposed changes in blue. Well, actually in combination, I guess strike throughs are in red and the new language is in a kind of a dusty blue color. So, and these, if we approve these, they go to the Board of Trustees for final approval. I guess the most, other than the position of the agenda, approval of the agenda in the agenda, and a few typos. The other significant change was we are proposing to include an option for truncating unreasonably long meetings. So at the end of section 4, there's a couple of options that have been presented. The idea being, we've had a few really long meetings, and do we want to give ourselves an out where if we just reach a point of exhaustion where we don't really feel like we can go on, to just, essentially end the meeting. And so that's there. And then, as you can see, the language for adoption has been tweaked a little bit as well. So did I miss anything on that, Rodney, as far as the changes?
No, you've covered the key changes. Yeah.
All right. So this is before us. Obviously, we would have to pick an option on that if you're interested. I mean, if you want to add something like that. And then if we finalize something, it can go to the Board of Trustees. If not, then we may look at another iteration. But we do want to keep our bylaws and rules up to date. So I'll open it for discussion. Commissioner LaBelle?
Yeah, just a couple comments. I'm content with any of the changes that were made in regards to option A or B for number 7. Either one of them work for me. I'd probably prefer number 7. Or sorry, option B, excuse me. I'd prefer option B over option A, but either one of them would really work.
I would concur with Commissioner LaBelle.
Okay. Commissioner Lapp?
Yes, I agree with both those commissioners on option B. I think that gives the board the greatest flexibility for making a decision depending on what's on the agenda and what the discussions have been to that point.
Okay. Commissioner LaBelle, did you have another comment? Your hand is still up. Nope. Okay. We could have, because we have options, we can have a motion to adopt one of those options if someone is so moved.
If I may suggest, in your agenda, we have the language there for potential motion down at the bottom of the first page under this item in parentheses, says motion to adopt the adopted bylaws. And what I would suggest would simply be after the word bylaws to simply say with option A or with option B. Just adding those 3 words would tuck in your preference there. And then ultimately, as I said, the Board of Trustees has final approval over the bylaws, so it would include a recommendation to the board as well.
Okay. Commissioner LaBelle?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to adopt the updated bylaws with option B under item K, number 7, and to recommend the updated bylaws to the Board of Trustees for final approval.
Okay, so the motion was made by LaBelle to adopt the proposed changes and adopt item or option B, I should say. Is there a second?
A second.
Commissioner Buckley? Second by Buckley. Further discussion? Please call us by name.
Buckley,
Yes.
Darren,
Yes.
Squatrito,
Yes.
Shingles,
Yes.
Cody,
Yes.
Albrecht,
Yes.
Fuller,
Yes.
LaBelle,
Yes.
and Lapp.
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0.
Excellent, thank you. All right, so we've got that out of the way. So the last item on here is our recurring item, which is the master plan implementation. Had some discussion earlier tonight about sidewalks and some other stuff. Is there anything, does anyone have any issues or thoughts that they'd like to bring up with respect to the master plan implementation? There was a kind of a summary of in the minutes, a nice summary of what's gone on before. and what we talked about the last time. This again, just as a reminder, this will be a recurring item. It'll be on pretty much every agenda. And it's really for at least for now anyway, it's going to be like this. If anyone happens to have something that they've thought of that they want to bring up at a certain point, when I get some more free time, I'll sit down and perhaps think of some discussion items, but it's open for folks who want to bring something up. Commissioner Fuller.
Yeah, on the minutes from the special meeting, there was a note that there was an electronic meeting on April 12th with the Home Builders Association. What were some of the topics brought up on that? I didn't make that webinar.
I can, if you'd like, I can kind of summarize some of that. This was the State Home Builders Association has identified a set of I call them principles or goals that they would like to see happen in terms of state legislation to protect or grow the housing industry in Michigan. That's something I can share with. I just got a copy of that not too long ago. It was remarkably difficult to find, considering they said it was freely available, but finally found somebody who would send it to me. This particular session was it was kind of billed as a here are our priorities session, but actually it was to tell the certain legislators what they wanted. This was we had Mike Shirkey, the state Senate Majority Leader, at the session. There was at least one other legislator, if I recall, but I can't recall which one, who was there, and it was really an opportunity just to tell them what for. And in some ways, it might even be called a complaint session. There was a substantial amount of the webinar that was taken up with venting about how awful local governments are and how we're so bad about making it so hard for new housing projects to come to pass, and that our rules are ridiculous. And they only cited one example. They went on and on about that, but it was only one example, one community it was cited, and that was the city of Ann Arbor. And it was only one project in that one community. They didn't talk about all of the high-end, high-rise apartment and condo housing that's going in downtown, how Ann Arbor greatly increased their height limits to allow for more housing downtown. Didn't talk about any of that. They talked about one subdivision on the fringe of Ann Arbor, in one of the few remaining green areas within the city of Ann Arbor, that took 4 years to develop, and they were so offended that it took 4 years. I used to live in Ypsilanti. I lived only about 3 miles from that site in Ann Arbor, and I know it well. It was a site that was ridiculous in terms of its natural features, challenges, both slope, wetlands, floodplains. It had every challenge there ever was. It had almost no access. It had one little access point that went through a neighborhood to get back to this 50 acres. That was all of its frontage was on the freeway, but very little accessibility. It took 4 years because it was a terrible site to try to develop. That and the fact that Ann Arbor was not used to dealing with residential subdivisions, and they really had no rules that worked very well because it never had a need to deal with it. So they were very disingenuous in citing only that example, but there are legitimate concerns about housing in Michigan. We have a housing crisis. There's a reason why the price of single family homes is skyrocketing. There simply is a supply and demand issue. We have far more demand than we have supply. The reasons for that, certainly local regulation is always a challenge. We do have regulations. I think they're quite reasonable, but I'm sure the housing industry doesn't think so. We are nowhere near as restrictive, but not even close to being as restrictive as some places are. They did note one of the driving challenges, and I think this is probably the key one, and that is cost of materials. The cost of wood, plywood, 2x4s, even OSB and T111 siding, the cheapest of the cheapest, has absolutely skyrocketed and is going up at an exponential rate, it seems like. The comment was that a builder can't even accurately price a house for a quote today. And they cited in this case a number of examples where a builder was working with a family wanting to build a home. They provided a quote, and before the contract was signed, the prices had increased. And they cited one example where there had to be a $30,000 adjustment in the price of the house to cover the change in the cost of materials just during the period of construction. So that this really, to my mind, is the single biggest issue, is our broken system related to construction materials. Part of that's COVID related still. There are still elements of the industry, for example, PVC. That industry is still hampered by COVID-related restrictions and is not really entirely open. Certainly the lumbering industry obviously has its challenges. And so I think for right now, that's the biggest issue. I think once that finally settles out, and I think the comments in the webinar, it could take a year or more to settle that out, then we'll be looking at perhaps some action at the state level on other topics. The requests made were all about prohibiting local government from doing this and prohibiting local government from doing that. Essentially the same kind of taking away local control that we've seen in other aspects. So I think there will be a need down the road to address this issue in Lansing and kind of set the record straight. But I have no doubt that the Michigan Township Association in particular will be involved in that process. And as things come up, I would encourage individual residents to do the same thing to kind of get the word out, because I do think, unfortunately, that the home builders, while they have a very valid point and concern, that they're not really reflecting with accuracy the issues at the local government level. Certainly not in the vast majority of the communities. There are troublesome ones, always are, but it's not an issue that really ought to be addressed at the state level as a broad removal of local authority. So that was the webinar.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And a little opinion from me, I guess, thrown in.
Other comments or questions from folks? Okay, well, it sounds like we're going to have we'll have more traditional agenda items probably at our next meeting, but we'll continue to come back to this and revisit it over time. So last call for comments on this. All right. So that was other business. So now we're at extended public comment. So if there's anyone out there who would like to address the Planning Commission on any item, whether it was on tonight's agenda or not, hit your raise hand button, make yourself known. We'll facilitate your ability to speak. Give us your name and address for the minutes and limit your comments to 5 minutes on any issue. Extended public comment is open at 8:40. And I note that we have no attendees at this point, so we'll go ahead and close the extended public comment back up also at 8:40. And the next item is final board comment. I'll just note real quickly, because I was reminded by Alex's question. I attended the public meeting of MDOT, which I think was last week, and I think I saw Commissioner Lapp there. I don't know if any others of you were there, and I believe Rodney may have emailed you the website. I would encourage you to have a look at that. There's a big project coming on 20 on Pickard. They're going to completely redo the interchange with US 127, and there's going to be paving over a substantial portion of that road. And some other things, but the biggest issue is roundabouts coming to the exit up there. But have a look at that. They're in the planning stages. The construction isn't scheduled to start until I think 23, right, somewhere in there. It's in the out years a little bit, but it's going to substantially change the look of that corridor. Commissioner Lau.
Yeah, people will need to make sure the information gets out to the community about how long they're expecting to be working on it, because it sounds like it's going to be at least a 2-year project. But they are going to try to keep lanes open the entire time.
Mhm. Yeah, lanes of 20. I didn't catch whether they think that the exit itself might have to close for a while. I don't know. I don't remember
I
that.
believe they said they would try to limit the closure to 1 ramp at a time.
Oh, okay.
This is the 127 exit at Pickard or at Pickard Road.
Correct.
Okay.
If you'd like, I actually have the file up here. Let me get to the right page. I can share.
Yeah, the pictures are I mean, it's pretty whack. I mean, if you look at it, it's really interesting looking.
Yeah. Let me share the screen here for the roundabout.
Would you be able to email that package to us? Or maybe just me if no one else is interested?
Actually, as I said, I think I shared the link to the website, and it's on the website. You can download it right from the MDOT website. If you need it, send me an email, and I'm happy to email it to you. But you can also, like I say, just go right to the MDOT link, and you can download it from there. But as I said, if anybody would actually like to, if you can't get a copy that way, or just like to have one email, just send me an email. I'll send it right back to you. So this, are you seeing the roundabouts?
Yeah, well, we see it.
So that's what they are proposing right now for the interchange.
Right.
One of the key items that I'm a big fan of is this refuge island at each end for pedestrians to cross, which will make that crossing easier. Obviously, not a lot of pedestrians cross right there, but we do get some, certainly in this area, that want to get to one side or the other. And so that is a far easier crossing than actually crossing at an intersection, because you can stop in the middle. The other big thing is that this would be a permanent median island. So, for example, you would no longer be able to make a left-hand turn into the restaurant here or into the gas station. Folks that wanted to go to those places coming from the east would have to circle both roundabouts and come back. Or MDOT is talking about working with Home Depot to try to create a more public solution back here where people can come in and go around the backside. Right now, there's kind of an informal process there through the Home Depot parking lot. They're kind of at least exploring whether they can do something more public there.
The other thing I thought was interesting was further down, well, here and then further down to the west on Pickard, they're looking at the number of entrances and whether there's any chance they could combine, reduce, revamp some of those to try to reduce the number of accidents along that area.
Right. Yeah, and in fact, on this diagram on the left side there, that must be the one of the hotels, I'm guessing, on the lower left corner there. But you can see they've got the two entrance exit things. You know, could that be combined into one, and those sorts of things. So yes, Jessica's right. They're interested in access management over the course of the of that whole corridor.
Are they looking to keep to the east and west of the roundabouts? Are they looking to keep that 5-lane traffic?
Yes, that would stay 5-lane through there.
Okay.
But it would be a complete rebuild from the storm water system underneath, curbs, gutters, pavement, all of it is going to be rebuilt.
Interesting.
So, other comments from commissioners in our final board comment?
Yeah, just one thing, I appreciate the reminder of that. I didn't recall that email, so I appreciate the reminder, Rodney. Something very similar at the city level is on Mission Street from, I believe it's maybe Bellows. I think it's Bellows into Bluegrass on Mission Street, their master plan and what they want to do with that corridor. They want roundabouts at Bluegrass, Broomfield, Preston, and Bellows. They want a boulevard in there. 2 lanes of traffic on each side with on-street parking. That's what's proposed in the master plan. I'm on the DDA at the city where we've just formulated, the committee with the city, the DDA, a couple representatives from DDA, CMU, and MDOT to try to kind of have some quarterly meetings on how we could see that come to fruition or basically get feedback from folks. I had met with a number of the business owners in this area that would be affected probably a year to 2 years ago, and got feedback from them, none of which was positive with what was projected or planned, I should say, and submitted that to the city, the staff, the planning commission, the city commission. I would say just, if you do have comments or suggestions or concerns, just, go look at the master plan and what's proposed for this mission. Reimagining of Mission Street is part of what they're calling it. So if you have interest in that, just feel free to gather more information on it, because that's in the process as we speak.
Okay, that's a good point. Thanks for reminding us of that. Ryan?
Yeah, I think I bring this up maybe once annually or every other year or so, but given the information that Commissioner Lapp just provided and that we've heard on the Picker Street project, as well as a recent example that I've gotten in terms of a special assessment district in my neighborhood, which I'm sure that you've gotten as well, Phil. I would once again encourage Rodney and Peter as our administrative staff to please consider the use of social media for information dissemination on some of these things. I know that we've gotten some pushback in the past from the township offices, but I will continue to make my appeal that social media would really get the word out on in terms of information dissemination and what we're doing and what we're asking of the public to give feedback on as well.
Okay. Other comments? Okay, hearing no other comments, then we'll close that. We've completed our agenda. Our May meeting is May 18th. That's the third Tuesday in May. So we'll look forward to seeing everyone then. So we'll stand in adjournment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thanks. See you, everybody.